Have we met before? I think I'd remember you. Where do I know you from? Well, anyway, who is a stranger you still remember and why? Story 1. 1. Helped an old lady find the right bus stop to get her home. I sat with her until the bus came so I could check with the driver that it was the right one. She told me I'm a good singer. She hadn't heard me sing, but said she could tell by my voice. I don't sing, and that she was going to tell her cat about me when she got home. 2. I had had a typical parent-teenager argument with my parents and went for a walk to get out of the house. I went and sat in the middle of some fields where 4 tracks meet. Did some crying, the usual. A truck drove up behind me. A guy got out. I thought my life was over. He sat down next to me, but with quite a bit of distance, so I wasn't too worried. He offered me a cigarette and some advice before going on his way. That second story could have gone all sorts of bad. I'm glad that stranger was benevolent. The first one I can kind of believe. I don't have the skill, but I think other people can figure out if someone's a good singer just by listening to them speak. Has that ever happened to you? You ever heard someone speak and just think they must be a really great singer? Story 2. When I was in college, I had to ride Greyhound buses home from vacation. One trip, I sat next to a guy my age who was really cute and very into books, as am I. I've never had such an instant chemistry with anyone as I had with him. We talked and held hands the whole trip, and when we got close to my stop, he asked me to come with him to his summer job in Montana. I said I couldn't, and he gave me the necklace he was wearing to remember him by. Sometimes I wonder if I had gone with him, would I be happily married on a horse ranch out west right now, or just dead in a ditch somewhere? That story is chilling in a number of ways. In a way, it reminds me of a Weird Al Yankovic song. Yeah, I know, it's weird. It's in the name. If you get a chance, look up the song Jackson Park Express. It's really funny. Story 3. I studied abroad in Tokyo my junior year of college when I was 20. I had never been out of the country before, was flying alone, and didn't speak the language, so I was pretty nervous. I was seated next to a woman named Ona, who must have seen I was anxious, so she talked to me over the course of the flight and gave me tips and pointers for my time in Japan. At the end of the flight, she had finished the book she was reading, and she wrote a kind note in it, signed it, and gave it to me. It's been 11 years, and I still have that book. What must have seemed like such a small gesture to her meant the world to me. She signed it? Did she write the book? The note of encouragement was nice. Was this story before social media? I kind of wonder why she didn't mark down any Instagram or Twitter handles that he could get in contact with her. Story 4. I was in college and 34 weeks pregnant. My baby hadn't moved for about 6 hours. I was on my way to the emergency room after my class had ended because I was terrified. A faculty member stopped me and asked if I was okay. I responded honestly and said, "No, my baby isn't moving." He held my hand and said what I assume was a prayer in another language. He squeezed my hand when he was done and made some pretty powerful eye contact with me. I thanked him and hurried off. I think about him every now and then. Not many people care enough to stop upset strangers, but he did. Story 5. I had just bought some new sneakers the day prior. I was leaving work and waiting for the crosstown bus. While I was waiting, this executive-looking guy was walking down the street. Nice suit, nice shoes, overall really well put together. So he's on the phone and he's arguing with someone. Sounds like someone he works with, and I hear him coming from half a block away. So he's walking toward my direction as I'm on the sidewalk waiting. There he is, arguing with this person. He gets close to me, doesn't even miss a beat, points at me and says, "Those are really cool sneakers," and then just continues on his way in his argument. This was 8 years ago. I like that. I think this guy just had to say something in the space of a conversation or else he would have lost his train of thought. He needed something to comment on, saw the sneakers, and just chimed in. It's good to know that he wasn't just all negative. At least that anger he was arguing with wasn't directed at this guy. Those must have been some really nice-looking sneakers. Story 6. I was once on a 7-hour nighttime train trip, pretty much on the verge of fainting from sleeplessness. I attended a Catholic school from age 5 to 12, and this might have played a role on what happened next. Sitting next to me was this 80-something-year-old nun, or sister, as we call them in Portugal, given that for some reason the word for nun is almost insultingly formal, and I just straight up asked her if I could rest my head on her lap. She said, "Of course, my son," to my 17-year-old self, and caressed my hair as I fell asleep. I drooled all over her habit, and she found it hilarious and mocked me relentlessly as I woke up at about 5 a.m. "Let's stop this train and ask for water," she laughed. Her eyes screamed peace and freedom. She was the coolest woman I've ever met. Story 7. I was tubing with my family in a very popular river spot. The river split into two sections briefly before connecting once again, one being rapid, the other calm. I fell off my tube backwards into the rapids. Tons of people were going down as well, so I was pretty much trapped under the water with other people's bodies and tubes on top of me while my knees were being scraped. I stuck my hand above the surface because I couldn't stand, and someone grabbed it. He lifted me out and began to ask if I was okay and if I needed medical assistance because my knees were bleeding badly. Me, being only 8, was shy and crying and didn't know how to respond. He cleaned my knee, and his wife bandages them, all the while staying with me until my father came down the other side of the river to get me. I wonder where he is now. I hope he and his family are doing all right. Story 8. Stopped by a pizza joint on my way home one evening and decided to sit at the bar and have a pint while I waited for my order to be ready. There was one other guy at the around 5-seat bar. I sat 2 stools down from him. About 10 minutes later, an older woman who is clearly Native American walks in, sits next to him, and starts chatting with him. It was clear they knew each other, and the employees of the pizza shop knew them too. As my order came out and I got ready to pay and leave, she turned to me and asked me what my name and favorite animal is. I told her my name and that my favorite animal is an eagle. I love any raptor, really. She pulled out a sketch pad and Sharpie and scribbled together the most amazing 30-second drawing of an eagle and said, "Here you go. Have a great day." And that was it. She told me her name, too, and put it on the drawing. So maybe that means she's not a complete stranger, even though I'll likely never see her again. I still have that drawing hanging on my fridge. I've considered posting it before, but I kind of feel like that would devalue the entire experience. I'll never forget her. Drawing is one of those skills that you really just have to keep doing to get better at it. I wonder how long this person has been drawing like this. This person just found the discipline to find a numerous amount of drawing prompts by asking total strangers. It's kind of positive, too. And very generous. Hey, this person got a free drawing out of it. A really good one, apparently. Story 9. When I was about 19 or 20, I had long hair. I'm a guy. Hair literally down most of my back. I got on a train and it was really crowded, but I was able to find an empty spot near the door in between carriages. Nobody else was coming that way, so I sat on the floor. The train isn't departing for another 10 minutes, so this old man heads out the door to have a cigarette. He looks at me and says that I should sit with him and his friends. That we'll have a great time. I said, I'm fine here, but thanks. But he insisted. "I'm serious. You'll have a great time." Again, I tell him, "No, I'm really okay here." He finishes his cigarette, gets back on the train, walks over to me and grabs me by the arm and stops, notices my 5 o'clock shadow, and immediately lets go, saying, "Oh, you're a man," and walks away in disgust. Left me thinking, what an absolute total creep. Story 10. Was driving to work in peak hour traffic on a freeway around 5 a.m. I'd been at the office until around 9 the night before and was working 6 to 7 day weeks. I had never experienced a microsleep while driving until that morning. Young guy in a car next to me beeped while we were almost stationary in the traffic. He just smiled and motioned for me to stay awake and looking forward. Totally woke me up when I hadn't even realized my eyes were closed, and I never drove that tired again. If he hadn't beeped, I can't imagine what might have happened. I think of it often. Story 11. When I was around 7 or 8, I was at my cousin's house with my siblings. My family is abusive, and at one point, one of my aunts came to this house to tell us she wanted us to be at her house instead. She liked to lock us outside and not let us use the bathroom, so obviously we said no. She called my dad and told him, and he got on the phone and told us he was going to come over there and beat the hell out of us and unalive us. My other aunt had a friend over at her house along with his wife. His wife held me as I sobbed and promised she wouldn't let anything happen to me. Obviously, the second she was gone, something did happen to me, but for that time being, it was the safest I felt in a long time. I never saw her again after that, but her kindness always stuck with me. Story 12. I was walking into the Dunkin' Donuts while my clothes were in the dryer at the laundromat. I saw a group of thuggish-looking guys walking right behind me, so I held the door for them and patted the last one on the back and said, "After you, my man," as they walked in. When we got in, I was about 5 people behind the last guy I held the door for. I saw him turn around and start gesturing my way. He asked, "How do you like your coffee?" I told him black, and he proceeded to order me a medium black coffee. His thuggish-looking friends looked at him funny, and I couldn't stop thanking him. I definitely got a little teary-eyed. Really changed my views on how I outwardly perceive people. Didn't expect at all for this thuggish-looking guy to buy me a coffee in front of his friends. I'll never forget that guy. Story 13. It was the first high school dance, and I wanted to skip, but my twin brother was going after a girl, and my mom didn't want to leave him at the school alone after hours, and since it was a freshman-only thing, forced me to go with. Eventually, we got separated, and I couldn't find anyone I knew, so I was just awkwardly standing in the corner trying to pretend I wasn't alive. And this girl came up and asked my name and what I was doing. I explained my situation, and she full-on grabbed my sleeves. I was wearing a long-sleeved shirt, so she pulled them over my hands, and we danced, which is something I never really liked and still will only do at home alone with my boyfriend. But I remember her regardless because she made me feel not so alone. And honestly, I had a lot of fun at a dance that would have otherwise been miserable. Like I said, I don't like dancing, but the relief mixed with her being a very overall silly person made it really fun. I never saw her before or after that, but I can still see what she looked like very vividly in my mind. Does anyone else think that was a really big risk on this girl? There are some people that would just rather be left alone. I could have seen the story going that way. You know, someone coming up to them and they just really want to be alone. It was so sweet the way this story ended. Story 14. I was around 10 years old and on vacation with my family at a super nice and large hotel. This place had a small arcade for kids in the lobby, but it was a really nice one. Skee ball, air hockey, etc. Being a gamer, I was so excited as I don't come across those very often. Tokens were kind of pricey, but I was pumped that my dad gave me a few dollars worth of tokens. Probably 10-ish tokens overall. I went to play air hockey, and the machine ate up all the tokens, which was half of whatever I had in total. Upset, I went to the front desk receptionist to ask if they could refund me my tokens. Rather than just refunding me the 3 to 4 tokens I had lost, she grabbed a disposable paper cup, filled it with tokens, and sent me on my way. 10-year-old me was psyched, and I still remember the shock, awe, and pure excitement I felt in that moment. Story 15. Got stabbed during a mugging and legged it away from the scene. Edit. To clarify, I was the one being mugged. Was full of adrenaline, but then got to a bus stop and started to go into mild shock. A woman probably no older than 21 came and called an ambulance and sat with me and was very reassuring. It turned out I wasn't too badly hurt, but to be honest, in the circumstance and confusion, you just tend to think, I'm passing here. Her sitting with me was so appreciated. She was so tender and supportive, but also relatively calm and collected given the scenario. I didn't look too clever at the time and was covered in blood. That was 15 years ago, and I still think of her. Story 16. When I was a little kid, this guy named Mr. Chambers would magically appear whenever my mom had a problem. This was in the 1980s, before most people had cell phones or other ways to contact help when in a rural area. I guess most problems were vehicle-related. Mom got a flat tire? Mr. Chambers would show up. Ran out of gas? Here comes Mr. Chambers with a gas can. One time, a hurricane knocked down a tree that blocked access to the dirt road leading to our house. And who showed up with a chainsaw? Mr. Chambers did. He was very tall and had dark curly hair and a very deep voice, which frightened me. I was the kind of child who loved strangers, but something about Mr. Chambers made me nervous every time, even though I should have had a positive association with him for always rescuing us. I'm not sure what it was about him, but as an adult, I've started to doubt that he was even a real guy. When I asked my mom, she said she's not sure who I'm talking about. Too long didn't read? Creepy man always showed up to help my mom when she was randomly in trouble, and now I'm not even sure if he was real. I'm not even sure this story is real. This is weird. The original person here needs to fess up. This is actually one of those creepypastas, isn't it? I first hear Mr. Chambers, and I'm thinking of some guy in a tux and a top hat, just showing up to this rural area with like a chainsaw and a very thin mustache. Yes, it is I, Mr. Chambers. I noticed your cow needed milking, and I came here to help. Brought my own bucket and everything, you know. Story 17. I've been a waitress at a downtown restaurant for some time. There was a festival downtown, and as we are a small family-owned restaurant, our staff is rather small. I was holding the floor on my own while my coworker was working the bar. A lady sat at one of my tables and was quickly becoming impatient and proceeded to scream at me in front of the whole restaurant about having to wait. Another customer I was serving stopped me as I was rushing by to tell me, "You're doing amazing. We see how busy you are. Take a second to breathe." She's come in once since and remembered my face and proceeded to hug me and tell her friends what happened to me. I love her dearly. Story 18. When I was about 18, I stopped in LA for gas to make it 2 hours north back home, and my card was declined. I had no way of putting anything in my tank. This was before Venmo and all that. So I sat in my car and cried for 15 minutes until a guy tapped in my window and told me to pull up to the pump. He put gas in my car and gave me an extra 20 for the road. I still think of him and hope it's come around back to him. Story 19. When I was about 13 or 14, my phone ran out when I was waiting for a bus, but I realized my bus wasn't arriving for 2 hours as it was a Sunday night and I don't live in a big city, so bus times are varied. I knew I had to call my parents, but I was very shy and too nervous to ask anybody. But a really lovely mother noticed I was looking very anxious and came and asked if I was okay. She let me use her phone, but then she also stayed with me until my bus came because it was late at night and she didn't want me there alone. I think about her a lot. She was so caring and loving. Story 20. Last year, my state had a terrible snowstorm, Connecticut, and a ton of cars couldn't make it up this hill on a highway to get home. After about an hour of waiting and pondering what to do, a stranger and myself got out of our cars and started pushing people who were stuck back on the plowed section of the road. The reason we had traffic is because some people couldn't make it up the hill and were effectively blocking both lanes of traffic, and we saw a plow down the road. Knowing we needed the plow to get home, this stranger and I and a few other followers pushed cars endlessly for 3.5 hours. We even pushed a small school bus. I'll never forget that guy. That dude was the man. Story 21. I crashed my car in an ice storm, and this guy pulls over with his big old truck and pulls me out of the ditch, cut some broken plastic out of my wheel well so the wheel would spin properly again, and sends me on my way. He told me he was bored, so he had been just driving around pulling people out of ditches all morning. Great guy. A year later, I'm in my friend's car and he's driving us home from work. He wasn't paying attention and smashed into a stationary car while going 45 miles per hour or so. I'm sitting in the grass in a daze from the impact from the airbag when who shows up to see if we needed help? Big old truck dude. I thanked him again and jokingly told him I'd prefer to never see him again, if possible. Story 22. I'm a young adult who looks younger than they are and happen to be disabled. I suffer from chronic pain that makes it difficult for me to walk, lift things, bend down, or do certain things with my hands, like opening things or tying knots. Whenever I go shop for groceries, I use the mobility assistance scooters the store provides. I fairly often have employees asking me if I need it, or straight up telling me they think I don't and asking me to get off and get a cart. Other customers will often glare at me as they see me using the scooter, especially senior citizens. A month or two ago, when I was about to pay for my groceries, an older lady in front of me offered to help lift my groceries onto the conveyor belt. We started talking, and she was really nice to me. When I told her that other people often say mean things because they think I'm faking my disability, she was shocked and had some kind and wise words for me. She then offered to pay for my groceries. I was so surprised. She even helped to lift the bags back into my basket for me after. I will never forget her kindness. It meant the world to me that day. That woman just sounded like an oasis in a desert of hatred. I doubt we'll ever get over our ability to just judge people based on their looks. Sometimes I wish all of us could just learn as a whole to have an open mind about things. This story just proves that a kind word can make a big difference, even if just one moment is all it takes. Story 23. I was filling up my car at a gas station along one of the main roads through town, was idly looking around while the pump was going, and looked over into the slow-moving traffic going by. Made eye contact with a guy in a red pickup truck, and we both held it and smiled. Then he rear-ended the car in front of him. Story 24. When I was 4 on a family vacation, I wandered off onto this bridge of ongoing pedestrians and found myself walking next to this teenage girl. She offered me her peach rings, and I declined, turned around, and wandered back to my family, none of them noticing I was missing for 5 to 8 minutes. Looking back, if it wasn't such a nice young girl, there could have been many differing outcomes.
Please like and subscribe if you made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 25. 10 months ago, I got into a horrific motorcycle accident and found myself laying on the street passing. The ground was scorching, as I live in Arizona, where we often have temperatures pushing 120 degrees Fahrenheit. I was being cooked alive by the pavement until a passerby jumped out of his work truck, picked me up, and put me on a moving blanket. I don't remember his face, but I remember his actions. He called an ambulance and waited with me until they came. Whoever you are, thank you. You deserve more than a comment online. If for some reason you're reading this, PM me, please. I still have your moving blanket. Edit. My wreck happened between Wrecker and McDowell on the 202 in the 90-degree curve. Not sure if that might help find this guy. Story 26. When I was 4 or 5, I didn't clean my room properly and my mother threw out my toys. I was quite upset as they went to the curb, crying my heart out. The garbage man picked up the box of playthings in one hand and me in the other, carried me to the front door, told my mother he couldn't be a part of that, made one hell of an impression on me. Story 27. Once I was taking a walk in London when I saw a Buddhist monk in a theater line. We made eye contact, so I smiled at him. The monk smiled back and then said to me, "I can see you have a very beautiful soul. I will never forget it. I'll remember those words all my life." Story 28. I was a senior in high school and wearing a skirt for the first time in 4 years. Skirts set off my anxiety hardcore, but I couldn't help myself. It was plaid with all these little straps hanging down and within school code. I'm walking downstairs to lunch trying to breathe and think, no one can see your panties, chill. About halfway down, this blonde girl turned around and told me I looked very cute in that skirt. I stared at her for a second while I could feel my body start to relax. I told her she had no idea how much I needed to hear that from someone. I wasn't looking for someone to tell me I looked good, but for some reason, that girl made me feel so much better. Didn't know her name and never saw her again afterwards. So now, I do this. If I see someone who looks badass or needs a pick-me-up, I'll find something to say that I hope will make them smile. Story 29. There was an older man, very thin and frail, in a public park near where I was sitting. I watched him climb over a decorative wrought iron fence to gather coins that had been tossed into the park's multi-tiered fountain. He got soaking wet under the cascading water, but managed to fill his pockets and a coffee can with as many coins as possible. After he climbed back out, the guy looked at me and said, "I'm hungry. It's been a long time since I've had any food." I just smiled with an understanding look and pulled out a $10 bill to go with the coins. It was all I had on me at the time. I'll never forget the look of surprise and gratitude in his face. Whenever I think that I have problems, I envision that old frail man and realize my troubles are few and inconsequential. So this story, it looks like the guy telling the story is the stranger in this person's life. Sure, the storyteller says he'll never forget the old man, but I'm pretty sure the old man will never forget that guy again. Hunger will really make you do whatever it takes. I wonder what happened to that old guy. Story 30. A woman that came to talk to me and my sister once when my mother threw a public fit in the lobby of a theater and my father dragged her aside to yell at her. She just came over and made small talk with us about the city. I knew why she was doing it, but she did it in a way that was not patronizing at all. And it was so unexpectedly kind to take the time to do that when most people would have just stared or awkwardly averted their gaze. Story 31. It was raining real hard and I didn't have an umbrella, but it was fine because I was still in the bus. My stop was coming close though. Now, my country's kind of poor, so this stop didn't even have a shed to take shelter from the rain. The closest place I could go to was a bit far up. I'd have to make a run for it, and that sucked. There were two girls in the same bus who got out at the same exact stop. We were wearing the same uniforms, but they were younger, so I didn't really know them. Turns out their aunt was waiting right there at the stop with another umbrella enough for the two of them. I got out of the bus right after them and was going to make a run for it when she called for me and shared her umbrella. God, she was so sweet, risking her side getting drenched to cover my side. Yeah, the umbrella was pretty small. She's probably forgotten me by now, but I'm still grateful she helped me. Story 32. When I was a little kid, my mom and I went on a walk on the morning of my birthday. I was maybe just starting school, to give a little context. We met an old man walking in the park and started talking to him about how nice the morning was, and eventually got around to my birthday. Turns out it was his birthday too, and that was the first time I had met someone with the same birthday as me. Story 33. I've told this story before, but it's definitely a stranger I will never forget, so here is a copy-paste. When I was a kid, we didn't have a lot of money, so we often shopped at thrift stores. What I loved about that was that you could get 10 books for $1. So I would plant myself in front of the book section and make piles of which one I wanted to get, and then decided after I'd gone through them all. One day, an older lady saw me sitting with my piles and asked if I liked to read. I told her I did and showed her a few of the books I found that I liked. She smiled and then pulled $1 out of her purse, handed it to me, and said, "Promise me that you'll keep reading." I was so happy and immediately stood up and said that I would. She smiled and walked away, and I went back to my piles, able to pick out an extra 10 books to take home. It was just a small act of kindness for her, but for me, having a random stranger encourage my love of reading and making me promise to never stop definitely had a lot to do with my continued love of reading. That was probably around 20 years or so ago, but I still think of her whenever I buy a new book. I can relate to this one. I've been going to thrift stores lately, and it's just amazing how many books are available. If you're not close to a library, there are just so many books you can get into, and for really cheap. That's a resource I think more people need to tap into. Story 34. When I was probably 3 or 4, I went to the bank with my mom, and she passed out flat on the floor while talking to the teller. An ambulance came to take her away, and I remember well a woman who held me and comforted me as I watched firemen put my mom on a stretcher and in the ambulance. My mom was okay, just had low blood sugar. I still remember her voice and her face. Story 35. I was 19 or 20 working at a car dealership going nowhere and in a really awful relationship. This lovely man with a full head of white hair looks at me and in the most non-passive, non-patronizing, completely fatherly way says, "You are surrounded by this beautiful glowing light, but have this cloud over you. I hope you're loved and treated well, because you deserve nothing less." This guy had no clue who I was, and I never saw him again, but I will never forget that. I had never felt more worthy of love. Story 36. Coworker and I stopped at Dunkin' Donuts for him to eat breakfast. While we were in line, an old lady offered to pay for our food after she started chatting with us. I told her I'm watching my weight because Summerbod didn't want a lot of sugar, and I'd already had breakfast. I'm 5'7" and 135 pounds with very low BMI. Lady says, "Give me a dozen Boston cream for skinny over here." Story 37. My old swim coach. When I was on my swimming team in 4th or 6th grade, I got a new coach halfway through 5th. I knew her for a couple days before she suddenly went on vacation. She didn't tell anyone, though. We thought she had died or went missing. A few days later, we got news that she was on a cruise somewhere, and then she never came back. We don't know what happened to her after that. The cruise ship came back safely to where it departed, but I don't know where she ended up. Maybe she moved. Maybe she got left at one of the ports. I don't know. All I know is that no one I know of in town ever saw her again. Again, we got another story here that feels like it's right out of a creepypasta. There's just enough detail to get us interested, but vague enough that we can fill in our own scary thoughts in our head. There's just too many questions. Why did she leave without telling anyone? Why did she get left behind? Was she abducted? Did she just want to be hidden? Story 38. When I graduated high school in 1989, I flew out to LA with the hopes of making it in the big city. Didn't work out. After arriving at the airport, I had a cab driver named Maria. I remember her name because she told me I would never forget it, and I haven't. Story 39 was early morning after New Year's. I was driving my wife's Miata. Car pulls up next to me at a light. I can tell they're about to say something, thinking they might laugh at the ride. Girl asks, "Am I married?" I said, "Yes." Then she says happily, "Wouldn't you like to come party with us?" I said, "Yes, happily." She said, "Are you sure?" Then the light changed. I felt flattered for a while. Story 40. This sweet old lady at my grandmother's store where she works asked me to help her load some drinks into her cart. And after I did, she gave me $1 for my work. It wasn't much, but it was really touching for me. About 10 at the time as well. Story 41. 20 years ago, I'm in high school and my truck broke down on the side of the road. Busy off-ramp from a busy highway, and a guy stopped behind me, drove me to the nearest store to buy more oil, and took me back to my truck and didn't ask for or expect a thing. I'm iffy on the memory, but he might have even bought the oil for me. I was a shaved-head, angry-looking ginger kid, and he was a black adult man, probably in his 30s. I wouldn't have stopped for me, but he did. Story 42. I was at a hotel, and there was this arcade machine with Street Fighter in the lounge. I was there playing by myself because I had no friends, and my family was outside at the pool. I'm 14 right now. Suddenly, this guy asked if he could play with me. It was fun, and it made me feel better because at the time I was feeling a bit lonely. We never exchanged names, though. This was a few weeks ago. Story 43. Met a yogi in a bar that tried to justify why spicy healing and spicy massage isn't spicy assault, yet revealed previously before going on this futile debate that he only picks clients he's attracted to and convinces them that they need it to realign their chakras. Total scumbag. But apparently, where I live, this place is chock full of these jokers. A certain movie starring Julia Roberts as the center of yogi baggery. Luckily, I don't frequent the places where these people frequent. Story 44. During a school trip at Nooseheads Beach in East Queensland, Australia, a man busted out of a bar playing guitar completely naked while singing, "Run, boy, run! This world is not meant for you!" while 2 police officers chased him. He looked at us with a fat smile. Would definitely visit again. 10 out of 10. Story 45. When I was 12 years old, I walked into the bathroom of a fast food restaurant. An older guy, mid-30s, was using the bathroom at the urinal. I walked up to the only open space next to him. Just as I started to pee, he rips the loudest fart I've ever heard. He looks over at me, my eyes are open wide in shock, and says, "You poot?" I just finished and walked out. Story 46. When I was little, I tugged on a random guy's shirt in a store thinking he was my dad. He was not. I then proceeded to walk away without saying anything after he turned around. I'm just as awkward today as I was then. Story 47. I was on my class field trip to D.C. in the 8th grade. Living near Chicago, I was pretty used to panhandlers and homeless people asking for money. Sometimes my parents would give, sometimes they wouldn't. But I remember walking down the street, and the gentleman was asking if anyone wanted to donate to the United Negro Cheeseburger Eating Fund. I laughed so hard I gave him $10. Still think it's pretty clever. Story 48. An around 18-year-old girl leaned out of a car parked in an alley and asked me if I wanted to smash. I was probably 10 at the time. Story 49. Was pregnant and shopping for toothbrushes, and this gentleman that was clearly out of my league flirted with me for a minute. Made me feel a bit better about my fat self. That was about 10 years ago. Story 50. Wow, we're on 50 already. Several years ago, I was hobbling down the street in an air boot, having messed up my ankle in some way or other. I walked past an electrician's van. The owner was sitting there in the open, rear door also sporting an air boot. We chuckled at the convenience, and then he said in a thick Eastern European accent, "Life is like a baby's poop. Short and poopy." Never gonna forget that guy. Story 51. One time I was walking on the beach in California while wearing a shirt that says "salty" on it. Clever, I know. This one Middle Eastern man in his late 40s walks up to me and says, "Salty! Ha ha! Like the beach and the water! Ha 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 ha!" and proceeded to give me a high five. Thank you, sir. You both confused and frightened me, but somehow I love you and will never forget you. Story 52. In 8th grade, I was in a group that helped new 6th graders learn about the school. I was very anxious that day, and all the kids in my group knew each other. So there was a lot of talking. One girl, can't remember her name, would shout very loudly, "Listen to the girl!" and everyone would be quiet and listen. She really helped keep the day moving. Story 53. The lady on my plane, I'm a flight attendant, who got really mad I gave her too much coffee and then poured it into the seat back pocket. I realized that day that some people will get mad at whatever they can, and there's nothing I can do about it. Story 54. A woman which I gave the wrong directions. Only realized when I was going to sleep a couple days later. Story 55. Guy singing opera on the Red Line in Chicago who tried to sit on my lap.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.